soar above the trees to find the gem between the mountains and seas. Your children know we try though we may fall. We stand united now to heed your call. Our fathers fought the fights for liberty. Forever I'll defend Guyana free. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody take a stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forever. Be holding on to you, Guyana, Guyana. May the blessings of God never leave your shore. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forever. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. If I think about the ways you make me smile, I'd be sitting here and smiling for a while. Although I know I make you cry sometimes, your happiness is ever on my mind. I cannot repay for everything you've done, but my love for you burns brighter than the sun. No matter where my feet and mind may go, my heart will lead to you and you alone. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana,
Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Thank you for joining me on this rainy Wednesday evening, December 14, 2022, as we explore an issue of some critical importance to Guyana, and that is transitioning to a green economy. I'm going to let my guests explain what a green economy means, but I should start by saying my guest is a professor at the Arizona State University. He's very wide in his studies, in fact, so it's quite a pleasure to have him. And I should also say that there was another professor speaking at the University of Guyana a couple days ago, and it was an absolutely superb presentation on the question of transportation system and some of the challenges that would confront Guyana, a large country with a relatively small population, wishing to go at 100 miles per hour. But let me introduce Professor Jose Lobe. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you and good evening to everyone.
Thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Can we start by you telling the viewers what do you really do? You're a professor. Ivory Tower, what branch, what area?
Well, let me tell you that the most direct answer I can give you, if you ask me what do I do that I think is most useful and important, I teach. I teach undergraduate students and graduate students, and I enjoy both. But I think that teaching undergraduates, who are the young people that we all recognize are the leaders of the future, I find both very important and very gratifying. And in my case, what I teach in my courses, I teach mathematics, I teach quantitative methods, I teach calculus. So that's not only how I earn my living, but that's how I think I contribute to society. And I think teaching is very important. I mean, part of that is, I teach in a school of sustainability, which I know might sound a little bit exotic. But in the school of sustainability, the issues that we think about and that we teach about have to do with how are we meaning societies all over the world, United States, Guyana, Europe, how are we going to transition into societies, social arrangements that are both more equitable and more fair? How can we alleviate poverty? How can we address inequality? But doing so in a way that does not damage the natural environment any more than we already have had. And there's even a more specific challenge. How do we do all that while preparing ourselves to adapt to the consequences of climate change? So in our teaching, I see our mission to give students the skills, not just methods, but the skills to think about those issues, because they are going to be part of the group of citizens that they are going to have to make decisions. Everywhere we are in the world, we're going to have to make decisions about how do we live, how do we interact with each other, how do we create wealth, how do we relate to nature. And we need to do it differently than we have had already if we are going to achieve those goals. Probably the audience has heard about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals: alleviate poverty, decrease inequality, stop damaging the environment, protect biodiversity. And I know that all of those you debate a lot in Guyana, which is part of the reason why I'm here.
Well, tell us a little bit more whilst you're here, because I get the impression from the associations you've had over the past couple of days that you're essentially associating with the University of Guyana.
So yeah, my entry point into Guyana has been through the University of Guyana, meaning my university where I'm based. I work in the United States, Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. The School of Sustainability, several years ago, by now, goodness, 4 or 5 years ago, came into contact. Maybe we can, it's a little bit of a convoluted manner, but it came into contact with the University of Guyana to develop a collaboration by which, I want to emphasize this, we assist, but we learn. So it's, the idea was that what could we do together at these two universities? And you know, Arizona State University is the largest public university in the United States, by far. I mean, we are a large university. A fairly influential one, meaning that what Arizona State University decides to do and how it does it does reverberate through the U.S. academic system. And we are vastly bigger than you. You know, we as an university have almost 150,000 students, which is part of your population. So we're big. You're small.
20% of our, roughly 20%.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's kind of remarkable. But it has been an interaction built around how can we help and collaborate as the University of Guyana itself changes. It seems that everything in Guyana is changing, as you said, very fast, including the University of Guyana, which, of course, has, I would say, not only the usual set of roles that a state university has in a society, but again, given your changes and your transformations, the University of Guyana seems to play an even more important role. And for us, conversely, let's say for me and my colleagues who are interested in this green transition, collaborating with the University of Guyana gives us an opportunity to learn, and almost like having a front row seat on how are you going to do it.
Yeah.
And I should say, there are many, many people around the world who are interested in this green transitioning, that we are very interested in. We really want you to succeed, because if you succeed, it will be an example of, look, it can be done. One success story, and we need success stories. So
We certainly do, but before we go there, you mentioned you're a public university, largest public university in the United States. Does that mean fee paying or
the way, you know, there is no, there are public universities in the United States, but they're associated with the states rather than nationally.
Yes.
So the way our university operates is a very standard one compared to other state universities. You know, every state in the United States has universities. So there is not free. There's a fee you have to pay. But if you are as a young person who are a resident of the state of Arizona, the tuition you have to pay is a smaller amount than if you're a student who comes into the university from somewhere else in the United States.
Sure.
And there's also a different fee structure if you come, let's say, from outside the United States. But what can also be said is that both due to aid programs provided by the government of Arizona and financial aid provided by the government of the United States, I'm confident in saying that a student who wants to go to the university in the United States, whether it be Arizona or California or any other state, our goal is that money should not be an impediment.
Could you be a little bit more specific, Professor, about your relationship with Arizona State University and its relationship with the University of Ghana?
Yeah.
What was it seeking to achieve?
Well, so the one very specific, I can mention two. One very specific interaction has been that one of the schools, so much like UG, my university is structured around schools and departments and colleges. So two of our schools, the School of Sustainability and this is a school that has a very long name, the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. They have collaborated with the University of Guyana to design a joint PhD program, meaning students, graduate students seeking a doctorate degree at the University of Guyana, take courses at the University of Guyana, take courses at Arizona State University, in person, although during the pandemic period,
Yes.
of course, like everybody, we had to go online. And so the design of that PhD program on sustainable development, and the fact that there are students who are taking those courses and are going to get their doctorates, that's the very tangible thing that have resulted of this collaboration. The other, another example, and let's say this involves me, and so also students from the University of Guyana can take courses online from our university, again in recognition that it's not going to be easy for students to travel back and forth. And one more thing, again now coming to me very specifically, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues at the Green Institute at the University of Guyana,
That's headed by Dr. Thomas Singh.
Thomas Singh, and work with Thomas and others in advancing the agenda of the Green Institute, which can be summarized as promoting discussion around the many issues involved in this transition that I gather everybody's talking about in Guyana. How do you transition to a green economy? How do you develop? How do you alleviate poverty? While, and this is what makes Guyana very interesting, while you're using oil revenue. You know, I have to say, let's say, when I should say I am from Puerto Rico, so in a sense I consider myself part of your same neighborhood. So when I went to school, in high school, we had a course on the history of the Caribbean, so I knew about Guyana. And so I also learned, when I learned that, Guyana is going to become an oil exporter. And then I also learned about, Guyana wants to be a green economy.
Yeah.
I did tell to myself, that's a very neat trick. You're going to use oil revenues to become a green economy. I have to see that. I mean, it's because...
We'll get there.
I'm
We'll get
sure.
there. I'm interested because I'm sure lots of Guyanese students would be interested. So if someone qualifies, completes the program, the doctoral program, that's jointly sponsored by the University of Guyana, the University of the State University of Arizona.
Arizona State, yes.
Does that person hold a PhD from Arizona State University?
Yes. The idea is that that person holds a PhD that has been granted by the two institutions. So what that says is that that PhD, whatever you can do with a PhD from the University of Guyana, or whatever you can do with a PhD from the University of the United States, that person can do. And now what do they do with that PhD? Well, that's up to them.
Has that program crystallized yet, in the sense that we have had a graduate?
We've had one.
We've had one.
Well, this program is very recent, and this effort, as with many things throughout the world, the development of this program was affected by the pandemic because so many things had to be done
Yeah.
remotely. Nevertheless, it is a testament to the dedication of my colleagues at Arizona State University and here, that nevertheless that they worked on it, and the students, I taught some of them online. So we began with a small cohort, but the very first individual, got his PhD during the recent graduation ceremonies.
Yes.
So
yes.
one, okay, you have to start with something.
Absolutely.
So we started with one, and again, given, I must say that given how much disruption there was with the pandemic, I'm fantastically pleased that, wow, we did it. We produced a doctoral
Yes.
student.
We did it as well.
And you did it. And hopefully,
We'll do it again.
hopefully
I'll do it.
there will be a lot more, but yes.
Professor, what is the role of a university in a society?
Oh, goodness.
You know, people think, oh, they're in the ivory tower, probably tenured for life and write a few articles, travel around the world.
You know, I cannot deny that what you just said now, it is indeed part of university life, and it's very enjoyable. It's very enjoyable to be a professor. But you ask a very serious question. I have to say I cannot give, I'm in no position to give an opinion as to what should be the role of the University of Guyana. But let me tell you
No,
what.
I'm talking generally.
But let me
I'm
tell
talking
you.
generally.
But what I can tell you very clearly is what do we see is the role of my university. So I am, first of all, we are
Within the context of the United States of
Yeah,
America,
yeah.
yes.
But we are a university of the United States. We're a public university, and again, to make sure the readers, so that the viewers understand, in the United States you have private universities and you have public universities. They have much in common regarding how they operate and what is their mission. But public universities, by virtue of being public, do take on a set of obligations. First, to the communities in which they're embedded. We
Yes.
are Arizona State University. We are part of the Arizona community. We have responsibilities to the residents of Arizona, who, after all, we receive funding from the state government. But as a public university, my university, and many of the public universities in the United States, we do think we have an obligation to our local community, to the United States, but much more than that, we have an obligation to citizens all over the world. Now, what is that obligation? Our obligation is to first prepare young people, help them acquire the skills they need for what they decide are their goals. Being an engineer, be a chemist, be a mathematician, be an economist. So we have an obligation to help them acquire the skills they need to do that. But beyond just teaching them the methods, the techniques, we do have to prepare them to think in an open and creative, evidence-based, and democratic manner on the many issues that they will have to be part of discussing as citizens of the world. So you're a citizen of Arizona, you're a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of the North America. We have an obligation to help you be a useful contributor in that discussion. And I should say, and maybe one thing, and then in university, to be an example that, to be a space where difficult conversations can be had, where people not only have difficult conversations, they might disagree and disagree quite vehemently, but to be an example that you can disagree vehemently, but respectfully, and hopefully learn, not just simply, let's disagree because we find it fun. But so I think universities need to be an example of you can discuss difficult topics, you can have very different views, you can learn from each other, and hopefully together think of solutions.
Well, I'm glad, because the first part of your answer to that question seemed to focus on your obligations to the student. But the second part is really an obligation to the society.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I said, especially, again, in the context of the United States, I do see a lot of similarities between what I hear colleagues at the University of Guyana speak of, what they see the University of Guyana's role, but I want to make sure the viewers understand I'm talking more about my own experience.
Yes.
We do believe that as a public university, yes, our obligations are to the students, and we take that very seriously. But then to the society that makes it possible for us to be a university. You know, we receive funding from the state government of Arizona. We receive funding from the federal government. We receive that funding because we say we're going to use it to help our teaching, help research that will help address important problems. And citizens then have every right to ask, well, are you using our taxpayers' money well? And we have to be able to say, yes.
Your experiences are in a first world country. Puerto Rico is U.S.
Yes.
territory. Now, in countries like Guyana, highly politicized, shockingly, should they when and should academics draw the line in terms of the topics in which they should engage, or should there be no line?
I can tell you my views. Again, I don't speak for, well, I don't speak for anyone, because I should also say that I had read enough about Guyana before I came here. This is my 5th visit, that I was aware that you have complicated politics. In fact, sometimes I joke with my colleagues here in Guyana that your favorite sport might be cricket, but your politics are more like rugby.
That's a contact sport. Fortunately for us, politics has really...
But
it is a rough and tumble sport, I agree, yes,
but,
indeed.
but I should also say politics in the United States can often be criticized for the lack of civility. I think, so for example, again, I'm speaking personal, I'm a professor, I'm a part of the faculty, but I'm also a citizen in the United States.
Yes.
I vote, I have views, I have opinions, I have very strong opinions. And I engage in discussions just as any other citizen will on matters that can sometimes get very heated. I wouldn't say it's a line, but it's a sensitivity that, well, when I'm in front of students in a classroom, my task is not to indoctrinate. First, I have a task to teach, and I need to do that. I have a task to promote an atmosphere of respect, and that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
I have to help them together inside a classroom. We need to have an atmosphere where there's absolutely no room for sexism or racism, and where people, individual students, need to feel like I can ask a question, I can express an opinion, and do it freely and without fear of immediately being criticized or insulted. That's part of our obligation. Within that, I can certainly insert my views. But what I need to be careful of is distinguishing that between, well, this is my view on whatever topic, and if someone asks me, who are you going to vote for, Professor Lobo? So, well, that's between me and the ballot box. And I don't ask you who you're going to vote for. And don't tell me, I don't need to know.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, but are we going to talk about the issues of the day? Of course. And of course, sometimes that discussion, if you want to discuss about the issues of the day, can, in a sense, lead you to express opinions that are taking sides in a political debate. So let me just give you a very clear example, since I know it's of relevance to Guyana. I do not know enough about Guyana to know whether this is relevant, but in the United States, there is a proportion of our population and of our politicians at various levels who say they don't think climate change is real.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, because of that belief, they oppose steps to address climate change. Now, To me, climate change is a scientific fact. So if a student in a class asks me, Professor Lobo, do you believe climate change is real? My answer is, well, you've asked a question that to me, the answer is evidence-based. I tell you unequivocally, yes. I am aware that when I say that, at that moment, I have said an opinion, which it so happens the prior occupant of the White House in Washington, D.C. disagree with.
You mean our good friend Donald J. Trump?
I have been angry at me, and I know that. Which is to say...
Well, he didn't like your senator.
So which is to say, Chris, that how do we do that? How do I as a teacher teach, promote these values, live the values of open discourse, do not indoctrinate, address issues, don't engage in, let's say, cheap politics? We spend a lot of time during the day thinking about, okay, how am I going to do that? But that's part of what you need to do if you want to be a teacher.
Right.
I mean, the easiest thing would be to do, I'm going to tell you what to think, I tell you what's right or what's wrong, I tell you who's an idiot and who's not. But I'm not saying a lot of my colleagues do that. There are places where that happens. That's harming them, and it's not helping society.
You know, you've answered that question very diplomatically.
Thank you.
In Guyana, very polarized. A lecturer comes out with a position, and he may find not only he is in hot water, but somehow the institution itself is tarnished. But that's our domestic politics. Let's go on to sustainable.
But can I intersect something? That situation you just said, we face that in the United States, don't
You do?
Again, not to fix it, but as I said, this fine balance. Oh yes, we are a public institution. What we do is open, it's transparent. We don't teach behind curtains. And I can tell you that there are many occasions where some citizens of our state, Arizona, let it be known, I don't like what you're teaching.
Yeah.
And again, part of what university is, well, it is a space where maybe some of us are going to say something that some citizens disagree with. But we need to create those spaces. Now, we need to make a judgment between an opinion being stated that I happen to disagree with, but we agree to disagree. There are certain values and views that we don't think there's room to debate. There's no, in my classrooms, in our classrooms, there is no room for
But
racism.
that's part of the challenge, though, because there are, as you said, there's still people who are climate change deniers.
Or, I mean, again, I don't want to get very dramatic with examples, but I happen to believe, and science backs me up, that there is no such thing as a group of people who are genetically superior to others. There are some citizens who might. In my classroom, what I will tell my students is, I cannot reach into your minds, I cannot read your brains. But what is the case in this classroom, there's no room for someone to voice a racist view. I'm not telling you you cannot have racist thoughts. I cannot reach into your brain.
Yeah.
But now, are there some citizens who think, well, that's restricting freedom of speech, or Professor Lobo, you are infringing on your students' rights? We have that debate and that discussion very often, very, very often.
The word sustainability came up a few times
Yes.
in your conversation. What does it mean in the context of a country going through a kind of transition, which is another point that you've raised? Here we are using resources that destroy contribute to the destruction of the environment, in order to protect the environment by a green economy? Well, let's talk about sustainability first.
You know, it is a term that admits of several definitions. I'll give you one that I like, I find useful, and so do many of my colleagues. But one way to define sustainable development is that we are making decisions about how to grow the economy, how to prosper, what to make, what to produce, how we're going to produce, and do so in a way that does not restrict the ability of future generations to make decisions about how they are going to create wealth or be prosperous. And what we're trying to, with that definition, what we're drawing the contrast with is, for example, if we were to decide today, some societies, well, you know, we're going to create wealth the way people created wealth 100 years ago. And we know of societies that 100 years ago made certain decisions and they grew wealthy. But one way in which they did that, something that was involved is, they use a lot of fossil fuels. That's a fact. It's not a moral judgment. And that had the consequence of creating CO2 emissions, which has given us climate change. If we keep doing that today, if someone said, well, I'm going to do what people did before and it worked, look, wealth was created, look around you, look at the United States, look at Canada, look at Germany, look at France, look at Italy, look at Brazil. Societies have grown. I want to do the same. Why not? Why should I not do it? He said, well, because we do now know something they didn't know before, that if you do exactly the same thing, damage is going to be done to the environment, which is irreversible. So that is what supports this definition of sustainability. How can I create wealth so that people, let's say generations 50 years from now, don't find their space to make decisions very restricted by the mess that we have bequeathed them?
Mm-hmm.
Which then that's connected to this notion of transition, because if you decide, well, I'm going to achieve a certain task but do it differently than people did 50 years ago, then you have to think, well, what am I going to do? What's different? And transition just refers to that, how we're going to continue to move around. How I'm going to get from Georgetown to Linden. But how can I do that while minimizing damage to the environment? How can I get on an airplane from Miami to Georgetown? It's in an airplane. It needs fuel. Is there a way to do that that will not damage the environment? How am I going to eat? How am I going to grow crops? They said, can I do that and damage the environment less? And by the way, it's not just environmental. Can we create wealth without exacerbating inequality? Can we satisfy the needs of a society in a way that makes the society less unequal?
We'll get there, but I want to take on the first point you raised, because you know this expression, can you put back the toothpaste in the tube?
Oh, yes.
And you know, you have the Kyoto Accord, you had Brazil, you had Scotland, Glasgow the other day. We don't seem to be making a lot of progress. Trump actually withdrew.
I think it's a very accurate assessment that we are achieving international coordinated action has proven to be much more difficult. And let's say I'm old enough that I remember a time when we thought we can do this. It's much more challenging, and I think I am part of that. I join with other scientists in thinking we are not doing enough fast enough. That's for sure. And I think there are many issues in terms of, and by the way, some of these issues, it's very easy to sometimes say, well, we're not making enough progress because, you know, the politicians involved are idiots, or they're greedy, and then, well, each viewer can decide about that aspect. But some of these decisions really are hard. I mean, these are hard problems. We perhaps still have not figured out how to address almost some of the ethical aspects here. And let me just give you an example. And this is something I was recently talking with my students. We just finished our fall semester. Because there's a type of ethical clash, and I think it's an ethical clash, that now occurs very often in these international meetings, and we just saw it now in COP27. And I actually think this is an ethical clash that you might find interesting as someone with a very keen legal mind. So, let's say I am country A and you're country B. And so, okay, we need to make an agreement to decrease CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
So we need to make an agreement. And, you know, we have to make decisions. It's going to be a little bit hard. Yes, of course, let's agree. Okay, who's going to move first? Well, why don't we both move together? Well, say you tell me I am responsible for having emitted CO2 into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
For many years prior. So you tell me you are responsible for a lot of the extra CO2 in the atmosphere.
You start
now.
with a negative.
So you move first, and I'll watch you, and once you move, I'll move. And I say, you're right, Chris. I am responsible for a lot of the excess CO2 in the atmosphere now. But you, at this moment, you are emitting a lot more CO2 than I am. You are now the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was the problem, you're the problem. You move first, and then I'll move. And by the way, this is not hypothetical.
Yeah.
I am the US, you're China. Now, someone could say, you two have to move at once. Isn't that obvious? But somehow I still go back to saying, no, you move first,
Yeah,
Chris.
you can't leave our people poor.
And yes, you're right. It has to be acknowledged. We haven't come up with a way to resolve this issue that the Earth doesn't care about history. Said we are pumping CO2 into the atmosphere now. Can we both agree to move together?
Well, one of the issues, you've put it as an ethical argument, ethical, moral. America says to China, look, we want you to be our factory.
Yeah.
Who's going to be creating CO2 gas? Surely it's China. Who's responsible? Is that China or America? That must be an awful decision to make.
And you're right. I cannot pretend. I want to make sure I don't pretend that I know how we can solve this. I do, on the other hand, perhaps what I am, like speaking personally, what I believe will be a more useful path out of this is for, just say, the United States to go and say, well, we as a society, we are going to decarbonize. That's a term, in case the viewers are not familiar with, that's just a term that's now is used to refer to, we are going to use non-fossil fuels. So
Yeah.
we're still going to use energy. We need energy for everything, but we're not going to use coal or oil or gas. We should go ahead and do it. We should do it. We should succeed
And
in doing
decarbonize.
it. Decarbonize. And once we do it, then we can tell the world, look, we did it. It can be done. China, look, we did it. You go ahead and do it. So I think at a certain point, and this is, I must say, this is what I think a lot of citizens worldwide are starting to demand. I myself, I think many citizens in the United States are now tired of this. One more international meeting, one more disagreement. My sense is, we as citizens in the United States, we are asking authorities in the United States, the state government of Arizona, the city of Phoenix, we should do what we can do, and we should have expectations of our authorities, and let's not wait for others to do it. And if we do it, if we do decarbonize, then we have an example.
You know, Professor, it's all right for an academic to say those things, not what about a politician who is seeking votes, who is seeking to raise the standard of living of his people.
Oh, well, that's, and I should also say, again, speaking personally, the developmental needs of many parts of the global south, you know, it is to be called the least developed country. Latin America, Africa, it's immoral, it's impractical, it's unethical to expect that those societies are going to make decisions about how to use energy that will sacrifice their ability to alleviate poverty. But on the other hand, and here's perhaps where things get a little bit, this is a little bit subtle. And now again speaking as myself, from my perspective, when I think about Guyana decarbonizing, and when I think about Guyana has to consider the effects of climate change as it decides what to do with its oil money, I am not doing it imposing on Guyana the same expectations or responsibilities I do to the United States. I do so because I'm thinking, what are going to be the benefits to Guyanese citizens?
Mm-hmm. But then you also have to put those, are those short-term, medium-term, or long-term? Because you can have a benefit to this generation, but one generation down the road is the opposite.
Absolutely, and I don't see any way out of that conundrum other than saying to be very aware of. So I'll give you an example. In societies that need to alleviate poverty, and you cannot do that without increasing energy use. Again, we use energy for everything, and as societies get wealthier, you're going to use more energy. In the short to medium term, which I mean 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, a society might decide that one way to provide the energy to do that, to alleviate poverty, we're not talking about getting wealthier, like that's the challenge of the US or France. Can we get wealthier than we are? No, I'm talking about alleviating, crushing poverty. You might need to use fossil fuels to do that. You might use gas to do that. But as you're making that decision, as you make arrangements to use a fossil fuel to allow you in 5, 10, 15 years effectively address poverty, are you doing so in a way that you will be able to, without trauma, leave that gas or fossil fuel behind? Because, you know, another way to put it is, you can decide, I'm going to use fossil fuels. Now, well, are you going to do it in a way that will allow you, as you indeed get wealthier and you are able to use more advanced technology, are you using fossil fuel today in a way that in 10 years will not be traumatic for you to turn off the tap? Okay, I'm going to no longer use gas. I can use now solar panels or windmills. Or am I putting in place today an infrastructure to use gas that will rob me of flexibility? I mean, that's a choice. I don't want to use the word an intelligent choice or a non-intelligent choice, but maybe what I should say is you can be thoughtful about it or not. But that's a different context from North America or Europe, where I believe we citizens of the United States, we are in a position to demand of our government, we need to move faster. We have to.
That's towards a decarbonizing
Yes.
economy.
Whereas Guyana, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Indonesia, India. The manner of decision, the choices that can be implemented are not the same. But that does not exempt, but here's maybe this is the controversial part of this conversation. It doesn't exempt Guyana or India or Indonesia or South Africa from being thoughtful and careful. Are you taking decisions? Are you making choices that will make it harder for you to decarbonize in the future? And there are ways, there are ways in which you can decide to use a fossil fuel today that will make it easy to stop doing that or not. And I don't believe the citizens, no government can be exempted from having to be thoughtful and careful. And sometimes a little bit of the discussion in these forums, you sometimes hear some of the governments of the Global South almost like saying, because you guys screwed up so badly, we can screw up too. And say, no. I'm all with you. I'm going to recognize.
That's a suicide pact, isn't it?
The responsibility that the Global North bears doesn't exempt you, government of the Global South. You have a responsibility to your citizens as well. And that's, we citizens of the Global South have to watch for their governments taking the easy way out by saying, well, they got to pollute, I'm going to pollute as well. Unfortunately, that's too simplistic.
It's simplistic, but what's their option? Leave the oil in the ground, leave the fossil fuel there, whether it's coal or whatever it is.
Well, I'll give you. I'm gonna be like a politician and answer your question by referring to an example, which is not Guyana, so I don't offend anyone watching.
No, you're all right here.
But let me give you an example of, well, what can you do? So, so there's a society, South Africa, large economy, yes, vastly larger than Guyana. But at this moment, the main fuel that's used to generate electricity is coal. Just about the worst fossil fuel in terms of CO2 emissions. And South Africa, much like Guyana, although on a much larger scale, it has an electricity system and an electricity grid that's simply inadequate to the task. It's just inadequate. For many years now, successive South African governments have been discussing, and citizens, well, we need to build a new grid. We have to build a new grid. We have to build a new grid. Finally, decisions were made, okay, you have to build a new grid. What is going to be the fuel of your new grid? That's your choice. It's a new grid. So you have to make a decision. And the South African government has decided that it's going to decarbonize the generation of electricity. It is a choice. They are not going to use coal. There's coal in South Africa. There's lots of coal. And it's true that South Africa is by far, it's not among the poorest countries in the Global South, but it is a country in the Global South. So to me, that's an example. You can decide, using the skills you have, and South Africa has a lot of skills and trained personnel, we are not going to use coal. And the goal in South Africa is that within 6 to 10 years, South Africa, the goal is to decarbonize its generation of electricity, which will be tremendous. And by the way, if South Africa succeeds, it will be an example to many other parts of Africa. But I guess what I'm trying to point out there, Chris, is you can make these choices without in any way saying, oh, South Africa is just as responsible as Germany for CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
No, but South Africa did have to make a decision. It has to build a new grid. It has no choice.
Non-negotiable.
But then there's, okay, you can build a grid like you had before that uses coal. That probably would have been the easiest. I mean, they know how to use coal. They have coal mines. They decided And by the way, it's in collaboration. There's a very it's an example of maybe effective international cooperation. You know, maybe it's very hard if you get, I don't know, 200 governments in the same room. Okay, it's not maybe not going to be easy to get agreement on anything.
We keep seeing that every year at COP.
But in this case, South Africa, the United States, and the European Union came to an agreement by which the European Union, the US, is going to give technical advice, financial advice, with the goal of we're going to work with you, South Africa, to build a new electricity grid that will be decarbonized. Maybe that also points a little bit towards how to move away from this I'm going to say it, useless, frustrating, huge gatherings. More smaller agreement, meaning smaller sets of participants that are more focused on let's do something. So notice, I said nothing about Guyana.
I noticed, but I might very well ask you something about Guyana. South Africa, of course, is an extreme example in terms of the type of fuel it uses. It's coal,
Yes.
and it's shale. Guyana is exploring, well, it's producing petroleum.
Yes.
It's in the process we get gas, which is less harmful than coal. Does Guyana then have, is morality on the side of Guyana?
Well, let me first notice the following, which I tell my students. I never use the term natural gas because that's almost marketing from the gas companies.
Mhm.
Gas is a fossil fuel. No, you're exactly right. Per unit of mass, it emits less CO2. But
Yeah.
we all need to be clear. It is a fossil fuel.
Yes, yes, it is. But less dangerous than coal.
Well, listen. Now, so I'm going to give you an answer to your question about Guyana, but maybe try to wiggle out of. I could certainly see that the following argument is valid, but then I will have a question for the Guyanese government. I can see how, as you transition, and you need to create wealth, and you need to alleviate poverty, you need energy. And there are still some unresolved technical issues with relying completely on solar panels and wind. So I can see an argument for you're going to use gas to fuel your energy needs in the next 10 years.
Yes.
As a citizen of the world, not telling Guyana what to do, but as a citizen of the world, I would ask of the Guyanese government what I just said earlier. Are you getting ready to use gas? But are you going to be using gas in such a way? Are you going to make investment decisions? Are you going to build infrastructure in such a way that in 10 years you can easily stop using gas because you have prepared the groundwork with photovoltaics, with windmills, with biomass, that you can, without disruption, transition away from gas?
It's a package.
Exactly. Now, it could, if the answer is yes, here, we have a plan. Here it is, Jose. Well, more importantly, citizens of Guyana, here's the plan. That as we get ready to use gas and doing this all other stuff, yes, that's harder compared to we're going to use gas, we need fuel, we're going to grow, let's talk in 10 years. As a citizen of the world, I don't interfere. I would be okay. I would find that a little bit disappointing, especially because you have a lot of people in Guyana who are ready to help the Guyanese government think of a plan by which use gas now, in 10 years, stop, without trauma.
Mhm.
But as you said, it means that as you build the gas pipeline, as you bring in the gas, as you bring the gas storage infrastructure, you will also have to be doing this, that, and the other. But here's one thing, and I sometimes joke with my Guyanese colleagues about the following. Very often, in many parts of the world, when you talk, especially with public officials, you need to do this, you need to do that. Very often you hear, well, it's not an excuse, it's a true statement. but we have no money. We have no money. We're poor. We have no money. That excuse is not that valid anymore here in Guyana. I mean, you're not a developed country, but I hope Guyanese citizens no longer accept the ready-made excuse. Look,
We need the money.
we have no money. What can I do?
Let me ask you, because time is running out. We've got about 4 minutes. This question, the development goals and equity and equity and equality. With a new economy, huge sums of money, are we likely to see a widening of the wealth gap or a narrowing of the wealth gap? For this reason, only people with money can take money opportunities.
That question, Chris, will largely depend on whether or not citizens, but especially the poor, are made to be part of the decision-making process. Absolutely. One of the biggest concerns that we have in the sustainability
That sounds
community.
great, but what does it mean in practice?
Well, let me give you a very clear example. So you are all now very much in the process of discussing what to do with the rising sea level.
Yeah.
And I understand that you have discussions about, should we move Georgetown?
Georgetown, yeah.
Managed retreat is a polite term. Okay. Well, you could imagine that process. And by the way, many parts of the world are having that discussion as Guyana. But you can imagine that the decisions about how to do managed retreat will be made without absolutely no consultation whatsoever, no input. And basically, it will be done on the back of the poor. Or you can imagine a situation where the urban poor communities demand and are given a space. Well, let's sit around this table, and together we have to decide how we're going to move, and move where and how. What's the timetable? Here's one of the few predictions I will ever make on TV. You can almost predict that if the decisions of how to do this managed retreat do not incorporate from the very beginning of the design process the communities of the urban poor, then managed retreat in Guyana will be done, as is often the case regarding urban policy in many parts of the world, in a way that benefits only the elite. So
My question was more direct. And this is, money goes where money is. And how do you, in a rapidly growing economy as ours is, with the kind of money that is thrown around, the urban poor, the rural poor, the hinterland poor, don't have money to take advantage of these opportunities.
they don't, but in many parts of the world, and here's something Guyana can take note of, in many parts of the world, the urban poor are organizing and are demanding a room at the table. So I would say, not only does Guyana might not have the excuse we don't have money, in Guyana you have many other things that other societies lack. You have a vibrant press. You have a Chris Ram. I understand your politics are, again, sometimes more like rugby. The citizens of Guyana will have, it's almost like citizenship is going to take work. You're going to have to not only take advantage of the opportunities and create money, that's great, but the citizens of Guyana will have to use the assets they have, as a free press, elections. You can organize with it. And if you don't, then future generations of Guyanans are going to look back and say, well, not only do we criticize the authorities, our parents failed us. Because you can organize in Guyana. You can raise your voice. You can vote. So, being a citizen actually often means work.
Professor Jose Lobo, thank you very much for appearing playing Dog Day. Hour has
Yes,
drawn on
I
us.
know we could talk with that a
Yes,
lot.
yes. I do want to thank you very much for sharing your time and your perspective on some very complex issues. And I think you've put them, articulated them much so within the understanding of the viewers, and that's not to suggest that they can't understand, but these are some complex issues.
Yes.
So I want to say thank you so very much, and we look forward to seeing you here again.
I look forward to coming back. I want to see how this story unfolds. Thank you.
Operators and viewers, thank you and good night. I think I will be out of Georgetown next week. I can't promise that there is going to be a program. If there's not, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and the best for 2023. Thank you and good night.
Yes, goodness, this is the end of the year. Wow.
Yeah, it is.
Everything you
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I said I could talk.